Hello. Let's keep talking about intervals. What do you say? So last time we got into a way of thinking about intervals based on the major scale. And it is a good way to get into intervals. And I think I'll just do a quick review of some of that stuff. I don't know, every time I talk about something, maybe I talk about it a little different. And maybe this will be a little different. Look, it's a keyboard. You guys have seen these before. Here's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And if you start on C and play up to the C, you just played a major scale. And that means that every interval from C, the bottom C, to every one of these notes, so like from C to D is a major second. From C to E is a major third. From C to F is a perfect fourth. From C to G is a perfect fifth. From C to A is a major sixth. From C to B is a major seventh. And from C all the way to the other C is a perfect octave. We like to use these abbreviations. P is perfect. Big M is major. Little m is minor. And yes, oldest student trick in the book, if your big M looks just like your little m, and you're taking a music theory class like for a grade, yeah, your teacher knows what you're doing. So I always make students, if their m's look the same, do this instead. And then we usually use a little d for diminished. And we use a big A for augmented. It's just kind of, these are just kind of conventions of how we, I'll get those out of here. For how we write intervals. We write one of these letters for the quality, and then the number for the quantity. Now, today I want to talk about it a different way. There's kind of two families of intervals. There's intervals that can be perfect, and those include unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Those can be perfect, and if they're not perfect, they're augmented or they're diminished. And we talked about this last time. And then the other intervals, remaining ones, seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths, they can't be perfect. They can be minor or major, or augmented, or diminished. Also, this seems like as good a time as any to let you know that, like, technically, every once in a while, you'll see stuff like a doubly augmented. Actually, I don't know if I've ever seen a doubly augmented interval, but you'll see a doubly diminished interval. And that's when it's even flatter than a diminished interval. Every once in a while you run into something that you like have no choice but to call that. Hard to explain. I don't know. Maybe we'll get there. This all works great if you're going off this major scale way. But I always, as a guitar player, have thought another way about intervals. And if you're not a guitar player, let me give you a quick overview. This is a guitar. The neck of a guitar, right? This is the head. Look, I'm not good at drawing, okay? And if you've looked at guitars, you know there's these, like, frets. We call these frets. And frets get closer and closer together. And a lot of times you'll, like, see a dot on the 3rd fret, and on the 5th fret, and on the 7th fret. And basically, if you push down your string in this slot, or this slot, or this slot, or this slot, it makes you have like a string that was this long, all the way from, okay, here's the body of the guitar, and here's the bridge of the guitar, and the string ends here at what we call the nut of the guitar. I've never known why they call it the nut. Someday I should look it up. It makes sense why they call it the bridge, but look, we're not talking about guitars. I'm saying, if you play a string without even pressing it down, It's like the whole length of the guitar. If you press down, like say here, it's just like you were playing a string that's only that long. Well, we call that stopping a string. Most guitar players don't use that word, but violin players do, and that's why, like in violin, if you play two notes at the same time, it's called a double stop, because you're stopping the string and you're stopping two different strings. Whatever. In the grand world of guitar, every fret represents a half step. So like if you play the open string and then you play here, it's going to be 1 half step higher. And this is going to be like 2 half steps higher, right? And this is going to be 3 half steps higher. And this is going to be 4 half steps higher. You see what I'm doing? I'm just counting. You know how to count, right? So whatever fret you're on, if you're on the 5th fret, that means you're 5 half steps higher than the open string. And so guitar, unlike piano, isn't like split up into like this white and black keys. In some ways it makes guitar a little harder to learn stuff like scales on, because you have to memorize like the shapes, and because there's nothing that just like leaps out at you. Even the dots on a guitar, if you just play all the dots, it doesn't really form a scale if you keep going. And not all guitars have the same sets of dots and all that. What it does is it gets you thinking, if you're a guitar player, at least if you were me, before I ever learned music theory, I had this understanding of interval. I wouldn't even have known what to call it. I didn't know it was called an interval. But it was basically based on like what fret on a string I was. And like if I number the frets, when you get up to the 12th fret on a guitar, let me go back to my diagram. The 12th fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The 12th fret usually has 2 dots on it on a guitar, or almost always. And it kind of is a special fret because the 12th fret, okay, this is so not to scale. The 12th fret on a guitar is exactly halfway across the string. And we'll talk about this one day, but if you take a string and you stop it halfway, the sound that half a length of string makes is always twice as high as this one. In other words, an octave, right? So if, say, you tuned this string to middle C, which you don't on a guitar normally, but say you did, and then you played the 12th fret, you'd get the next C. This is all totally normal stuff if you're a guitar player. If you're not, consider this revenge for guitar players always having to learn keyboard stuff when we took music theory. Really, I don't want to exacerbate the divisions between guitarists and keyboardists. This is a time in our world where we should all be coming together. Okay, that took a weird turn. So if you consider these as frets on a guitar, it's also the number of half steps. And that's what I'm going to call this column. The number of half steps. So if you have 0 half steps, that's going to be our unison. A note, the interval between a note and a note 0 half steps away is our unison. And the interval between a note and the note 12 half steps away is our octave. And when I say those, I mean perfect unison and perfect octave. Let's find all the other notes in a normal scale. So when we go to C to D, we have to go a whole step. That's 2 half steps. So to get our major second, we have to go 2 half steps. Remember, because whole, half, whole, half for a major scale. To get to the 3rd degree of our major scale, we go up another major second. And from the bottom, from 0 to 4 here, is a major 3rd. So whole step, whole step. Now we go a half step to get to our perfect 4th. Then we go a whole step to get to our perfect 5th. And a whole step to get to our major 6th. And a whole step to get to our major 7th. So see what I mean? Like on a guitar, if you want to play a scale, you have to move different number of frets each time. And this is like imagining you're playing like a 1-stringed guitar. Obviously on a normal guitar, if you're a normal person playing a normal scale, You're not just going to play it all on one string. Or maybe that's not obvious, but I'll tell you that it is. Okay, so, like I said, some intervals are perfect, and if you lower them, or they become diminished. So this major third could also be called a diminished fourth, depending on how you spell it. This note here could be an augmented fourth, but it could also be a diminished fifth. This note could be an augmented fifth, but it could also be a minor sixth, right? Then this note here could be an augmented sixth, but it could just be a minor seventh. We skipped some, so this one is usually a minor third, but sometimes it's an augmented second, right? And then this one is pretty much usually a minor second, but it could be an augmented unison. It's not like illegal to have an augmented unison any more than it's illegal to have a diminished octave. Really often something that sounds just like a major sixth will actually be a diminished seventh. So as you can see, every one of these can have more than one name. I didn't write them all down yet, but like this fourth we could call a augmented third. Every once in a while you'll have a reason to call it an augmented third. Why? Because it depends on how it's spelled. When we're talking about interval quantity, it's all about alphabet. So let's go back to our C scale. So if we're going from C to D, any kind of C to any kind of D, that's going to be a second, right? So like if we went from C right here to D right here, major second. If we wanted to get to that minor second, we would call it D flat. But if it was going to be an augmented unison instead, it'd be a C sharp. See what I mean? It's that note in between here, but how you spell it tells you the quantity of the interval. So if you spell it from C to C, it's some kind of unison. If you spell it from C to D, it's some kind of second. Same here. C up a minor third, well, a third has to be 1, 2, 3. It has to be some kind of E. So we'd call that an E flat. But if we wanted to go C up an augmented second, we would have to call it a D sharp. See what I mean? Let's try a different one. Let's try and go from C to B flat. If we go up there, it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Some kind of seventh. But it's not the one in the scale, it's one smaller. So it's a minor seventh. There we go, B flat. We could also call it A sharp if we wanted to call it an augmented sixth. And so this is like the great confusion of intervals. Don't be fooled. The quantity part of intervals is easy. The quantity part, just count up the alphabet. It doesn't matter what kind of C and what kind of D, it's always going to be a second, right? You could even have a C sharp go into a D flat. Those sound like the exact same note, but we'd still call it we'd call this a diminished second. We could even theoretically have a C double sharp that went to a D flat, and we'd have to call it a doubly diminished second. Isn't that weird? So like, even though a C double sharp sounds like a D, so it sounds like it went down, we still call it a second, just a second that got shrunk so far that it went up instead of down. Doesn't really happen. This is just kind of like to show you how deep it gets. So just always remember, quantity, easy. Count up the alphabet. Quality, I'd say it's about half and half of all the students I've taught. Some students do better thinking in terms of the major scale and that all the intervals in a major scale are major or perfect, and then adjusting them according to these lists here. And then some people, students, especially guitar players, tend to do better thinking of this table. Either way, it's some kind of boring stuff you have to learn. And next time we'll start talking about the intervals from an aural perspective, which will be a lot funner. Okay,